when Digital Reach first started, our website was not impressive. Like we have a great website now. We didn't have a great website then. And it didn't matter if somebody was being referred to us. If we had a friend who said, Andrew and the Digital Reach team are great, you can trust them. They show up on our website, they go, it's not like super encouraging, but it's not going to like kill the deal. But if you're trying to advertise, you're trying to get organic traffic, you're sending emails to people, like that traffic is not showing up with a pre-existing source of trust. Like you have to build trust with them to start. And so with that, having a crappy website or web experience, I should say, it hurts the trust.
Welcome to the Clear Brand Marketing Podcast, where we take the mystery out of marketing and help you get more leads and sales with a clear brand and proven marketing tactics. I'm your host, Alexander. And today I'm talking to Andrew Seidman. He's the co-founder and COO at Digital Reach, where he has spent more than 10 years designing full funnel go-to-market motions for enterprises and funded startups, which we're going to hear a lot about here today. He's a former high-stakes professional poker player and is, as such, is no stranger to process orientation, risk management, and time-sensitive decision-making. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Alexander. It's good to be here.
Glad to have you. We're going to get into some things today that I get a lot of questions about, but a lot of folks don't really have the answers. And so I'm excited to get to hear from you and pick your brain on some of these things. So first is, this is go-to-market. So tell me, for the folks who might be kind of bootstrapping their own thing and not doing anything with funding or developing this big thing that's going to have a launch, walk me through these clients. Who do you typically work with? And then what is go-to-market and when does somebody need that?
Yeah. So I guess we started Digital Reach 10 plus years ago, 11, almost 12 years ago now. And so obviously been through a few iterations. We started off just as a paid media company. And then we iterated from that into once we started realizing that like paid media success was actually dependent on all these other things. Like you needed to have a great website, you need to have good landing pages, you need to have good content that was appealing. You had to have a brand message that people would resonate with. You had to have data that didn't like drop your leads on the ground or that like let conversations lapse or things like that, or build good audiences with that data in different advertising platforms and so forth. So we realized that all these things were kind of interdependent. And so today we have an agency that focuses on full go-to-market that we kind of chop up into 4 unique teams. We call pillars here, which are branding, content, digital experience. So this is like your website functionally, RevOps, which is your data and your reporting and that kind of thing. And then pipeline generating activities. So that's advertising, it's organic search, like SEO, it's email marketing, it's social media and that kind of thing and so forth. And so I think when we look at what is a go-to-market, it is actually taking your initial brand promise, like who are you as an organization? What is the product or the products that you do? Who's the audience that you're aiming at and why do they care? Finding a brand message and a brand identity, and then converting that into amazing content, converting it into a great digital experience, a great website, a great advertisement, and then building out all the systems, sort of like the plumbing that are required to then make the engine run. Once the engine is all kind of built, it's then like a question of injecting more content into the engine, injecting more cash into the engine. But in a successful go-to-market, you've established your brand message so strongly that you can have a pretty clear one-to-one of ROI. Like you put cash, you put content into the mix, and you create revenue on the other side of it. So yeah, that's I guess super light synopsis of how we do it, but I'm happy to dig into anything that seems interesting.
Yeah, which we're going to do here. So who would you say? I mean, those 4 categories there. It seems like every business needs this. So when you're talking about this go-to-market, what would you define that for me? And at what point does a company reach out and say, yeah, we need some go-to-market help?
Yeah. So it really, in terms of when a company reaches out, it kind of depends on the organization. We tend to work with well-funded startups. So usually startups that have raised, 50 million or something like that or more, as well as enterprises who have, global motions with offices all over the world and that kind of thing. And so it sort of depends on where they are. When we deal with the startups, it is more of everything was built very chaotically with no central plan. And so now it's like they're encountering conflict and like what we call technical debt in their systems, where like maybe they never lock down their brand message. And so like the sales team says one thing, but the marketing team says another thing. And it's very confusing for the buyer. Or maybe they have like one person who built all their data systems, and then that person like left and got a new job. And then suddenly it's like a massive crisis and they don't know what to do. So with the big enterprises, it's more strategic. It's more like, hey, we have some idea of how we want our company to look in 1 or 2 years. And so like, how would we come in and maybe like present them with sort of a forward facing look at that? But the truth is that honestly, whether you are like just starting like pure bootstrapped startup all the way to a giant enterprise, the principles remain kind of functionally the same, and also so do the traps. So it's very common for any organization to immediately look at, let's say, paid advertising and fall for its allure. It's very alluring in a lot of ways because it gives you very fast information. It gives you, if you have product market fit, it will give you money very quickly. And it gives you really clean, clear data. And so there's sort of this idea that just like I can advertise my way through anything and make money. But the only people who can just sit down and start advertising like that successfully are ones who have amazing product market fit. Like their product is awesome. They have customers who are like ready to buy it. Like it's really easy when you have product market fit. Mm-hmm. For most organizations, it is a competitive environment. You have to work at product market fit. You have to understand what the message is and do a lot of like pre-work before you can make like advertising a thing. So we really pick up kind of wherever someone is in the go-to-market, whether they've got great brand material or not, whether they've got a great website or not, whether they've got good reports and data or not. And then ultimately, once we've kind of built all the plumbing, then it's like, okay, now we're going to actually go get you some business, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So how do you determine if somebody has product market fit before you dive in?
Yeah. I mean, virtually every company that has customers, so if you have customers at all, you have some product market fit. Mm-hmm. So we haven't worked with pre-customer companies, I would say. So for this is really directed at folks who have their first, at least their first few customers. Obviously, most of our, if they've got $50 million in funding, like you probably have like more than that. But we're really starting with some existing customer base that's showing this. And from there, we often will start by doing a product market fit analysis, which is basically looking through your data and seeing who are your existing customers and what do they buy. So for a lot of organizations, they have multiple products or multiple different types of things. And then honestly, a very important part of this as well is asking our clients, who are your best customers? Not just your biggest customers, but who are the customers that are the happiest, the most likely to refer you to someone else to drive new business? We'll probably come back to that idea of referrals being like word of mouth being like the core value driver, but it really is. It's by far the most effective marketing channel. So, we will help try to identify like who are these best customers. And once you have a section of like, okay, these are the best customers, you can start to look at some of the dimensions there. You can say, oh, like 80% of your best customers all bought product X. And even though you have products Y and Z, like it's really product X that people are super excited about. And also we noticed that the people who bought those, they tend to be, you may have really been focusing on, let's say, the tech industry, like selling into the tech industry, but these are actually all industrial accounts. And so like maybe there is something interesting here happening, or a bunch of them are in industry. So maybe there's something interesting about like, I don't know, manufacturing and product X that is really like the center of your product market fit. You can already see how advertising might become much more effective if you already have a niche that has demonstrated like, oh, we really love this product and we want to buy it, as opposed to being like, oh, we really want to get into the tech industry. Well, you can certainly try, but it will probably be more expensive. It'll be more difficult, it'll be more competitive. Whereas if you have product market fit data somewhere, you can usually get a head start and kind of focus on what really works.
So you're really looking at, this is where I love these 4 pieces, and I love that one of them is RevOps, which is essentially data, if I'm hearing you right. Being able to track this stuff, knowing where the money's coming in. And if you're able to track well, if I'm hearing you right here, then you can start to parse your data out, and you can look at exactly what you're saying. Who do you like? Where are you making the money? And kind of reverse engineer a niche. Is that kind of part of this product market fit?
Yeah, I think data is like chronically underrated. I'm honest, just to be full disclosure, I am a data person. Like my background originally in marketing was in marketing operations. And so there is like automation systems like HubSpot and Marketo. There's CRMs like Salesforce, or HubSpot's another common one. These are often underappreciated for how much value they hold and create. And I think, just as a quick sidebar, especially now that AI tools are becoming kind of like reaching their first stage of maturity, there's going to be many more stages beyond this, but they really consume good data and they can do amazingly powerful things. So like reporting is a great example of this. Like if you have organized data like with good hygiene, you can run an unbelievable amount of incredibly fast analysis right now using AI tools for basically free to say that kind of like product market fit analysis that I had before. Like if I fed a chart of data that says this is the product that was sold, this is the amount that was sold, this is how happy the customer is, this is their industry, it's very easy now to pull out those insights. But you have to start with, are we tracking what products are being sold? Do we track any information about the account? Which can then become its own little bit of a rabbit hole where there's like very clear best practices, but it's kind of like you end up in data science territory. Like it's kind of like you're tracking information about accounts and opportunities and people and campaigns maybe. And then like if you get like our company, for example, we have a separate bucket called engagements. Like an account is going to have people and opportunities, but they also have engagements. And those all have their own sort of prescriptive set of data. So once you kind of get into it, there's a ton of power, but it's tricky and challenging. But I would say, there's a reason it's one of our kind of core pillars, is because that data then sort of like gets propagated to all of the people in your company. So whether they are customer service people, whether they're salespeople, whether they are marketers, like they all are going to rely on that kind of source of information. And again, it's chronically underrated. It's difficult, it's expensive, people don't want to do it. But once you kind of get into the trenches, it's like, this is the stuff that really, keeps the whole thing together.
So what are the baseline elements or activities that you think everybody at minimum should be tracking?
Well, in a B2B environment, you certainly need to track the leads or the people that are expressing interest. Like you're going to need to have some way of staying in touch with the people, contacting them, and like kind of knowing who your audience is of interested or engaged leads. You also, in a B2B environment, you really care about who they work for, because ultimately you're actually trying to get an organization to sign a check. Now, if you're really working with small businesses and you're like dealing with proprietors, for example, like you can have a one-to-one, like the person kind of is the company. But for most, like anything above a proprietorship, you're in an environment where you probably need multiple stakeholders to buy in to signing a check. So that means you're actually like then looking at a company which has they have a revenue amount, they have maybe some funding, they have like an industry or a product, or you can get really deep down that rabbit hole too. You don't need to, like the MVP version of this doesn't have to be so deep. It can just be like, I know it's a big company in the tech space is like probably enough for most like starting organizations. You want to track your opportunity history. So you want to be able to see, what do people buy? Ideally, you want to be able to see who all was involved in the buying conversation so that in the future you can model future deals where let's say you're selling into the IT line of business. Maybe you find out that you need the director of IT is kind of like the main buyer, but maybe you need like an IT practitioner and a web developer to buy your product, something like that. Well, if you start a new opportunity with someone else and you have, let's say, just the director of IT that you're talking to, you now know you kind of need to go after the other two people in this buying committee and like make sure that they know about your product and that they're kind of on board. So I think the really critical ones are people. So it's like in Salesforce, that's leads and contacts. In HubSpot, that's just contacts. It's accounts, so like accounts in Salesforce or companies in HubSpot, and it's opportunities in Salesforce or deals in HubSpot. Those are the three kind of core functional objects that I think are critical to track. There are a lot of other areas of data that you might want to track for your specific business. So depending on what your product is, it's common to then track a fourth bucket that is like something to do with your product information. How is it used, or like what's the information specifically oriented towards that? If you have like a trial, like how many people are in the trial, like that kind of thing, which usually is not an account. It's sort of people get confused a little bit by the account information versus like the engagement or the product information. But I would say the three ones that really matter the most are people, companies, and opportunities. Long-winded answer, I know.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So what's your approach to traffic sources? Like how much do you care where the lead came from?
A ton. I care a massive amount about where the lead came from. But I will say that it is a tricky, like this is the industry term for this would be attribution.
Yeah.
And it is a tricky thing to answer because almost certainly somebody quote unquote came from some collection of things or areas that influence that, especially if your product has a longer sales cycle or requires multiple people to be involved. Like attribution for B2C, like e-commerce, is much simpler. It's like, okay, like they came straight to my website and they purchased, like that's all there was to it. But most of the time in B2B, it's like they heard rumblings on social media. Their friend mentioned your product to them in a side conversation. They got 3 emails from you that they ignored, but they saw your brand in them. And then they were like, okay. And then at some point, something in their organization broke. They remembered you. They went to Google, they typed it in, and then they went and found your site. The problem with lead source and attribution is that in that example I just gave, people just look at the last touch and they go, cool, it's Google. Google was what caused this to happen. Google plays a really important role in capturing high intent and bottom of funnel engagement like that, but it is just one piece of like generally a much broader set of attribution. So actually, I think the most effective means of attribution, you'll see this on Digital Reach's site, you'll see this on some other folks, and actually, like I'm kind of like ripping off another agency called Refine Labs in their they had this idea first, at least that I've heard, which is they just have a required field on their form that is just text. So it's not like a drop down of options. It's just text that you have to fill out that says, how'd you hear about us?
Yeah.
And even if somebody came from a Google search, which would show up in like the digital attribution, like you can track that in your Google Analytics and that kind of thing, and in your CRM if you have the right software. So instead of it just saying like, oh, this was Google, like Google did have a role, but maybe they said, oh yeah, like I found you on Alexander's podcast. And you're like, oh, okay. Even though that might never have showed up in my metrics, my digital metrics, like right. I can easily attribute it now, like, oh, this was actually from this piece of content that we did. And so I think there's the attribution question is very deep rabbit hole, very fascinating. But I think, you can assume that that you should have a presence in a successful go-to-market. You should have a presence at the very beginning of the conversation, like somebody is just hanging out on the internet reading about stuff, like they should find you. And then they should find you as they get more and more serious or closer to like considering and then ultimately buying your product. So it's not just one channel that's going to be the thing. It's going to be like a whole collection of activities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. I interviewed somebody who he's got a company on that helps with marketing attribution, and his thought was, well, I don't care what the metrics say because it's going to be wrong, kind of what you're saying. But so they track all of the activities on a day-to-day basis, bring it down into leads, and then kind of go through the rest of the process that you were saying there, all the way to sales. And so they can look for patterns. But I also really like what you're saying about just give them a form that they fill out, and they can tell you the story if there is one. They can say, oh, my friend told me about it, and then I went to Google, and then I heard about you on a podcast, and they can share, as much of the touch points as they remember. And that's going to be more accurate than just, the HubSpot says that the source was Google search.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, they usually only give you one piece of info, but it's the most valuable piece of info. They're usually just like a podcast, and you're like, that's really helpful. Like, I'm glad I have that information.
Yeah.
It's also to clarify, it's not that I don't appreciate or value the digital data. And for a ton of organizations, they have nothing. And so starting with some first and last touch kind of attribution is still super, super valuable.
Yeah.
It's also important for internal organizational stuff. Like if you have a manager that you need to prove that this is a good idea to spend money on, one of the biggest challenges with the upper funnel stuff, like brand marketing and content marketing and that kind of stuff, is it's much harder to show that it makes money. If you're just doing hey, we kind of talked about this at the very beginning of the show, Google attribution is okay, cool. I put in $100, I got $150 back. That was great. Yeah. And it's easy to fall into the thing that's I can sell this to my manager. I can show that this is working. This is why Google is so rich. Everyone in the world has basically followed the same pattern of being okay, easy to attribute, clearly makes ROI, spend money on it. So it's not that I don't like that data. It is valuable, but it's just valuable in context of all the other data.
Yeah. Love that. Well, I want to kind of go down a rabbit hole, and then we're going to come back to, how do you get these folks in the first place? But the rabbit hole is AI. So you mentioned using AI for, you feed it the data, and it can kind of find these patterns for you. How do you think AI is kind of changing the way that marketing functions?
I would say that it is not quite there yet. I would, a year ago, everyone was kind of freaking out. And I was very confident that there was a lot more smoke than fire. That it was you could do some cool party tricks with AI a year ago, but you couldn't functionally replace hard labor or difficult high context work. But I'm a kind of technophile, and I was always this is definitely coming though, for sure. And I've been preaching to folks for a long time, get your data ready because it's going to need the clean data. This year, there is still a lot of smoke relative to the fire, but the ratio is much fierier.
Okay.
And so there is there is a massive amount of potential for connecting marketing activities and for doing things more, for using AI to make marketing happen more effectively. So one example of this that I think is probably my favorite example of this. So let's say that you and I are on a phone call, a recorded Zoom call, let's say, and I say, oh, hey, are you still in San Francisco? I'm going to be in town in a month. And you say, oh, no, I moved to Denver. And I say, oh, no, that's cool. I didn't know that. Awesome. Okay. Small little sidebar, small talk in our conversation, etc. The transcript is getting automatically loaded into the AI agent. The AI agent is smart enough to look for important things like, did Alexander move? It then sees, oh, I moved to Denver. The AI then pings the CRM agent, goes into the CRM, finds your record, sees that there is a city and state for San Francisco, California, updates them to Denver, Colorado, leaves a little note about why it did it. And then let's say that in a couple months, I end up leading a sales team to do a field events in person in Denver. We have some contacts in Denver. And so I go to Denver and I go into my CRM and I pull the list of who do I know in Denver to go meet up with in person. Well, in the first version of it, the salesperson actually has to go into Salesforce manually, leave the call kind of thing, like go do this thing, update the data there. It almost never happens. Like people just basically never do this.
Right.
But you can
They're trying
imagine
to
that
close a deal. They're not thinking about.
yeah, exactly. They got a whole conversation ahead of them that they're thinking about. They're not like, I've got to go update the data in Salesforce that he moved to Denver. Like they're probably never gonna do that. Whereas in this AI world, that super valuable piece of information gets stored immediately, autonomously, and then becomes like part of your marketing effort. You could be running another good example, like there's often like geofencing advertising in a specific location. So like, let's say there's a big conference in Denver. I'm going to go target all my Denver people with ads. And now you're on the Denver list. Like you weren't on the Denver list, but now you are. And it's just like AI using data to make the marketing super targeted, to like connect people more smoothly. I think that is just like one example of many, many examples of how AI will, everyone talks about like content generation, and like certainly generative content is an important like thing. But I think the agent stuff is way more exciting for me personally. Like the generative content still has to come from someone with kind of really deep, high context knowledge to make it good. And it can be helpful. It can save time, but it's not like you can't just click play on an AI and have it write like compelling or useful content. You kind of need still a lot of context from an expert. But this kind of stuff, like sending information between systems and like stopping data loss and all this other stuff, super, super valuable.
Yeah, like it's the glue. It has potential, and kind of plugging all these holes and filling gaps. I mean, I think that's totally amazing.
Totally.
And having those integrations. I mean, like Fathom. I've got a client who uses Fathom. At Clearbrand, we've been using Fireflies, but this actually might get me to switch. Where apparently, and maybe Fireflies does this, and I just don't know about it. But they went. This person said, "Hey, well, let me go. I can just ask Fathom if we talked about this thing." And it'll just search for all of the meetings, and it'll just grab this little topic, like, no problem. I mean, it is kind of the second brain, but I like the automated updates you're talking about too.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I said I like the automated updates that you're talking about too. That's the next step, right? Rather than just helping us remember stuff, which is where it's been, or helping us write more faster, which is kind of the content side, actually taking action. That's pretty incredible.
I mean, you could imagine a world like the product that I'm working on at Digital Reach right now. Like you can imagine imagine you have tied together all of your brand messaging documents to your digital experience and your ads and your pipeline generation and so forth. So let's say that you have a brand message that's like, I don't know, we sell to XYZ accounts. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to actually change it. We're actually going to sell to ABCA accounts now. I'm going to change my message. Right now, that involves like full-scale manual rebrand. It's like tons and tons of like labor of training and reorienting and so forth. But you could imagine a world where you have all these agents that say, oh, there's updated source information. We just go and we automatically update your website. We automatically update all your landing pages. We update all your emails. Like it's all agents like taking the source information. And so I think this is actually what you see is like as the AIs get smarter, they're able to do higher and higher context tasks. So like something really high context, like what is my core value set? Who do I care about selling to? Like that is still for now in the human zone, but like all of the stuff that happens based off of that, like is gonna, I think, pretty quickly become robotic, AIified.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's pretty crazy. Even what's been happening, crazy. But I think that action, because right now you have to fact check everything. You got to make sure it did it right. It understood you.
For sure.
We're still seeing even grammatical errors, because we use it for content writing to write bigger, better stuff.
Yep.
But man, that's great.
It's coming.
It's coming. Yeah. Okay. Well, so let's talk about, I'd love to hear about some of this pipeline stuff. I think that at least in the conversations that I have of those 4 categories you'd mentioned at the beginning, that's what I hear folks needing most typically? I mean, you might hear something different. There's this sense of, yes, I know I need a brand, but I've got to be able to pay the bills first. Like, we'll get to a brand, I need these leads. I mean, I see you. So first off, tell me what your thoughts on that, and then let's get into the pipeline stuff.
No, every organization in the entire world, as far as I can tell, is operating the exact same way. Okay. Which is, yes, I know there are strategic things I should be doing or thinking about, but I have real life problems today. And there's business case issues that need to be solved before I can do this other stuff. And actually, like, I don't blame anyone for this. Like, it's a real thing. Like, in the purest hypothetical, maybe you spend, you would spend a year tailoring your brand to make it so perfect. Like, you would do hundreds of customer interviews and synthesize exactly the right product and language for it. But like, it's not realistic. In reality, you have to get leads. And so I think finding the minimum viable product, like what is the thing that you can, like the Pareto principle or like the 80-20 rule, like, can you get a bunch of value out of just spending some time on your brand? Like, can you get your brand into like good enough position that you can then grow off of it? So I will say this, everyone comes to us saying, what we need is opportunities. We need pipeline, we need dollars. And we often have to collaborate with them because they'll often just be like, okay, we're going to give you $100,000 and you're going to turn it into pipeline. And specifically, you're going to do it by putting it onto LinkedIn ads and Google ads. And that's going to give us we're going to get a pipeline. And we kind of have to reframe it as, well, okay, that you can gamble with it, which is essentially what that is doing. Like, you can go onto those areas and see whether or not you have product market fit with your current content and messaging and so forth. And like, you can validate that. And sometimes with some of our clients, it worked. Like, we put it in there and it's just like that, it has customers. But we usually have to work with folks to be like, well, if we drive a bunch of leads, but your data system drops them all on the ground and no salesperson ever sees them, it won't be a good use of money. Another really common one that people kind of have to get their heads around is like the opportunity cost of not fixing some of those things. So like, I'll give you a good example. Like, it might cost you, let's say $5,000 or $10,000 to build a really good landing page from scratch. Good designers, good UX people, good developers, like maybe you have a chat bot going on there, like something that is like really good. Let's say that you're spending $50,000 a month on your ads. Well, on Google, the amount you spend for your rank is dependent on something called quality score, which itself is dependent on the quality of the web experience. So if you get a good web experience, it literally just pays for itself right away if you get an improvement in your quality score. If you look at it by conversion rate, like how often do people that you have paid to have come to your site, how often do they actually become leads or customers? So like, often these investments in the plumbing, assuming that you have enough budget to actually like spend on the ads or whatever it is in the first place, the investments in the plumbing are almost always like things that make you money. Mm-hmm. And so there's sort of like some balance you need to have of like, what is the minimum viable product? Or like, how much should I invest in the quote unquote plumbing versus how much should I invest in the actual traffic itself? And I would say that most organizations make two mistakes. They don't invest enough in the plumbing. They assume that the plumbing is not that expensive. It actually like that not fixing it won't be that expensive. It turns out not fixing it just gets exponentially more expensive the more you grow. And then the other thing that people do is they go into, when they actually do advertise, they spend their money on the bottom of the funnel. So maximum amount of money on certain keywords, for example. And
like
when it's
super high intent, is that what you mean? Super high intent keywords on Google Ads?
Yeah, super high intent keywords, but often those are super competitive keywords. Yeah. And so the way Google's bidding system works is the more you try to get to maximum impression share, the more they charge you. So like basically finding an appropriate amount of impression share and then using the rest of your money to invest in starting the conversations elsewhere, like before people get to Google. Most folks really struggle with this because you're not going to point right to the ROI immediately, especially like the first and last touch, like click attribution stuff. If you're trying to start a conversation in social media, it's a very hard thing to attribute. And so most folks don't invest in it. But if you zoomed all the way out and did like, let's say like a media mix attribution where you're trying to just see like, okay, we spent X and then Y happened, you'll see that like the most successful organizations are doing a full funnel approach. Like we're starting conversations at the beginning of the funnel, they're nurturing those conversations in the middle of the funnel, and then they're also present at the bottom of the funnel. And that means they didn't blow all their money trying to get 100% impression share for like some keyword that 70% impression share would be great for them. And now we're officially ranting. So
no, I love it. I love it. And I appreciate you. We actually bundle because of this, we'll bundle the different elements together so that, we're not running ads to a bad page. If you want ads, great. We're going to do the page as well. Yep. So I love the rant here. I think it's much needed. So for the person who is thinking, I've only got this budget and it makes the most sense to me to put that all to Google Ads or SEO or whatever, they have in mind. And you say, hey, actually you need a website. I hear some of this is actually going to bring the total cost down, but I mean, it's kind of a bigger upfront, nugget to bite off there. Walk me through a little bit more of that kind of conversation because maybe there's somebody listening who's in that boat.
Yeah. I mean, often the options are not really very palatable. Like, running a successful go-to-market is pretty hard. Mm-hmm. And so you're often faced with a choice of like, I could be highly inefficient and waste a ton of money, but also get some leads. Or I could be much more efficient and spend money in ways that are really effective for the long term and also have no leads and have my business go under. And so it's kind of like a devil's bargain.
Yeah. Which bad option is going to work better right now?
Correct. I think there are like Band-Aid, we literally call them brand-aid solutions nice. That are like, okay, we're not going to redo your whole website. That would be a really expensive thing to do. You should do it at some point, but like you really don't do it. But the good news is we don't have to send any traffic to your website. So we are going to make a really good single landing page, much smaller cost. And we're going to just send all of your paid traffic or all the relevant paid traffic to that template. We can clone that template for different messaging or that kind of thing, but like we're just going to send it to this sort of like smaller thing. When we look like this is actually a thing we've really focused on in the development of our new product this in 2025 is what are the really like need to have things. Like you need to have a good conversion point. It doesn't necessarily need to be a full website. Now, like we said before, having a really, really qualifying good website will do very important things for your brand. Mm-hmm. Like if somebody, again, you're still going to be inefficient if you don't fix that. Like some decent percentage of your traffic is going to find its way still to your main website. And then they're going to be like, oh, that's kind of disqualifying. Like, I don't know if I want to buy from those people.
How bad does a website have to be disqualifying, do you think? Because I've done some calls and seen some websites that are really bad, but this is like, $100 million companies.
I think it depends a lot on the existing brand power, which is to say, if you have a ton of brand power, then your website actually is not as important relative to that. My favorite example of all time is Craigslist. Like Craigslist has like the worst website of all time. Oh, yeah. But they the product market fit was so good and the brand became so universal that they never even cared about updating it. They're like, why would we do marketing? Like everyone in the world just comes to us already.
Yeah, and it would almost ruin the vibe if they did this whole brand refresh and it make it look like Facebook Marketplace or something like.
Well, to be fair, they're getting their lunch eaten now by Facebook Marketplace, who took a good UX into the same space, and like now they're losing. Mm-hmm. But for a very long time, no one had the vehicle that Facebook has to go take them down. It's actually probably a cautionary tale for folks who are like, I never need to invest in my product because I have like great product market fit. And it's like, well, like eventually someone is going to come for it. Mm-hmm. But I think so. In some cases, if you have a huge brand, like another good example of this is just like Microsoft. Microsoft's websites are often like super confusing and hard to navigate, and like it's impossible to find the thing you're trying to find. And it doesn't really matter because like 70% of all the computers in the world are on Microsoft, and so like you just have to do Microsoft things. So there's that component. The other component is the quality of the traffic that's coming to you. So for example, if you have like when Digital Reach first started, our website was not impressive. Like we have a great website now. We didn't have a great website then. And it didn't matter if somebody was being referred to us. If we had a friend who said, Andrew and the Digital Reach team are great, you can trust them. They show up on our website, they go, it's not like super encouraging, but it's not gonna like kill the deal.
Yeah. Good enough.
But if you're trying to advertise, you're trying to get organic traffic, you're sending emails to people, like that traffic is not showing up with a pre-existing source of trust. Like you have to build trust with them to start. And so with that, having a crappy website or web experience, I should say, it hurts the trust. It's kind of like I literally today was shopping. I was looking at different content software. Like we're like thinking about like a big upgrade to our content production software suite. And I was looking at sites, and I probably looked at 5 different sites, and 2 of them, the websites were just clearly better designed websites, like much more intuitive, like much more modern, really like friendly design. And those are the 2 we're going to look at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
so I think, competitors are definitely part of that mix of how good does my website or my brand need to be.
Yeah.
If your competitor is Apple, it's probably got to be pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's helps somebody, determine kind of where they need to start. So unless you think we should go into another part of your 4 kind of buckets there, I'd love to hear a little bit about your pipeline management, because there's a couple pieces that I'd love to get into.
Yeah, pipeline is the marquee spot. That's where everyone wants to be. So you'll probably hear me still go back to the other ones sometimes, but yeah, let's talk pipeline.
Okay. So walk me through what you do in this, this overall, we're talking about go-to-market strategy. We're talking generally about bigger companies or well-funded companies. What do you do to build their pipeline?
So from a digital media perspective, well, I guess let me even zoom one step out first, which is first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at their go-to-market motion, which is to say, are they trying to drive a high quantity of qualified leads, but all those leads are of similar value with kind of a traditional lead generation approach? Are they really focused on certain accounts? So like we've had some clients, for example, who are even so strict, any lead that's not on their list of accounts, they won't talk to. So it's like, if somebody fills out a form, I want to buy your software, they're like, tough break. Like you're not on our list, so we will not sell to you. Okay. So that's like a relatively extreme version of account-based marketing. Mm-hmm. But choice about whether you would do lead generation or account-based marketing would influence the strategy we would take in driving pipeline. And then the third one we work with a little bit less often, it's product-led growth, which is like you're leading with a free trial. Someone's going to come and they're going to try your product for 2 weeks, and then they're going to be upsold into a paid membership. And then ideally you get a lot of those paid memberships and that kind of process. Yeah. But let's just for right now, just talk about like, I think lead generation as the starting place, just like my classic pipeline generation with qualified leads. So from a digital perspective, there's not that many different channels. You have your advertising channels, you have your email channels, you have organic search, you have organic social, you have content syndication, you have some programmatic advertising, you have, and even that's like we're kind of getting towards the end of our digital media now. You have some other media. You've got like word of mouth is a super important medium. You have like field marketing or events as a way to like, make interactions with your customers. But there's not so many different media that it is like an overwhelming collection of options. Now, inside of those media, there's different channels and that kind of thing. So it becomes more complex. But for the media that we focus on, they all have different attributes. So some of them, for example, like paid media and email, are super fast. If you send out a email to a bunch of people, you're going to get some responses. If you send out ads to a bunch of people, you're going to get some responses. Like you can do that. You can just convert money into traffic immediately. And email also is a conversion of money into traffic because your email list is a valuable asset and it deteriorates. So if you use it a lot, it goes away. And also, like if you use it a lot and too much, like spam people, it will hurt your domain and cost you money in the long term as well. So it's like these are ways of converting cash into traffic quickly. A lot of folks come to us because they need opportunities quickly, and so those are the media that we recommend to them. Other ones,
are you doing like mass cold email? Is that what you're talking about,
or just like, and I mean, it could be salespeople doing email. It could be like sending emails to your existing lists. Like if you have, let's say, an engaged lead list that you've like cultivated over time, all the way ranging to like outbound cold emailing, which in general I would vote against. But certainly like there's gray areas in the United States and about doing that. But anyways,
so you want to be a little more targeted. I love this because I see cold emailers on social media saying a lot of, talking a lot of big game, and I just haven't seen it.
I mean, it has been a forever game of cat and mouse between people trying to stop spam and people trying to spam.
Right.
And the reason why people spam is because it's a numbers game, and like some percentage of spam emails work. But the risk reward ratio is like, you can really damage your brand. You can piss off your actual qualified, audience. Like there's a lot of downsides to cold emailing, not to mention it's like probably illegal in most places. Right. But regardless, I think the idea here is like you have some media that are really fast. Like you can go look at, okay, let's just do like an engaged list. Everyone that's ever followed you on LinkedIn, anyone that's ever been filled out a form on your website, anyone you ever met at a conference, like you have a list of people, you're going to then just send out some emails to them. Like that's a fast way to drive business. On the other hand, like ranking in organic search. Well, insanely powerful thing if you can rank for your relevant keywords on organic search. That means that you will pay Google nothing and Google will just give you customers. However, to do that, you need to do, like Google is a kind of relatively slow optimizing machine. And so you need to create a bunch of really good content around the areas that you want to rank for. And you need to basically keep doing that until stuff sticks. And then once that stuff sticks, you then kind of iterate on it. And it's a process that takes at least 6 months, if not a year, to show real functional results. So a lot of folks come, they're like, oh, we need to rank for these things like right away. Well, you're not going to be able to do that with organic. But organic can put you in a very great position for the long term. So when someone comes to us, they say, we want to drive pipeline, we want to do it with a lead generation motion. We might say, what is your time horizon? Like if you have a balanced time horizon, like we want to both get opportunities now and we want to be healthy in the funnel in the future. We would say, okay, you're going to do a mix of things. You're going to work on SEO for your brand authority for the future. You're going to operate both organic and paid social to interact with your audiences where they live. And start to develop a brand presence. And you're going to advertise on Google search, where people who have existing demand or existing high intent searches, as well as your brand searches and potentially your competitor searches, like those people can find you very kind of immediately. And then you're also going to do some sort of targeted emailing to engage audiences with really good content. So we're going to kind of do those organic search, paid search, organic social, paid social. Email is usually like the right collection of pipeline generating activities to do. But I'm going to then dip out of the pipeline pillar for just a second. If your content isn't great, it doesn't matter. Like, nobody is going to want to engage with you, buy your things, whatever, if you're not speaking their language, coming at them with a message that is resonant to them, like thinking deeply about like what is the circumstance someone is in when they decide to buy my products. It is I'll give you an example for digital reach. It's a really big difference between being like, we sell digital marketing services. Cool. We are one of infinite people selling digital marketing services. If you just had turnover in your RevOps department, you're probably totally screwed. Call me and we'll help. That is going to speak directly to some marketing director or manager, VP or whatever, who is totally screwed because their RevOps leader just left. That email is going to drive much more like high quality intent response, or like that ad is going to resonate much more strongly because the message is much better. So it doesn't matter how great of an emailer or how great of an ad manager you are if you don't have something really compelling that's resonant with people.
Yeah. Well, and I love that message as well, because you know that there's at least a little bit of wiggle room in the budget. If somebody left,
right? Gotta be. Yeah.
You know, we'll come in and that makes a lot of sense. And so how would you go about targeting those emails? Would you do a search for folks who are hiring for that position and then email those companies?
So the real answer here is data, right? Like, we need to be able to construct an audience that is relevant for this. So a good example, let's just take this RevOps example for a moment. Like, I'm going to try to drive pipeline for our RevOps business. And I'm going to do that first by, let's say I have account data that shows technographics. This is a sophisticated example, but like there's a site called Built With, and Built With basically displays all of the code that people have publicly listed on their sites. So my company works with HubSpot and Marketo. We don't work with anyone else or on any other software for RevOps or for marketing automation, let's say. So I can immediately just download all the data from Built With. I can upload it into my CRM, and then I can run a list that says, show me only the accounts that have these tools. It's like, okay, cool. I know that I'm talking about RevOps, so I'm going to be looking at the marketing operations and revenue operations and sales operations leadership. And maybe I'm looking at VP level marketing as well, like that kind of thing. So I'm really going to be kind of like limited by my job title. I'm going to be limited by my the accounts that have the right technographics. And I'm also going to make sure I'm limited by the accounts in general. Like, I want them to be big enough that they would actually have a RevOps group that would pay for this kind of thing. So maybe I say, okay, you need to have X dollars in funding or X dollars in annual revenue. And then now I've got this nice little list. Now, if I have good contact data in my database, I can then like apply that list and be like, boom, here's an email list of, let's say, 500 RevOps leaders who, or, marketing leaders who might have this problem. And then I can also upload that list to LinkedIn, for example, and be like, let's just say that if I'm on LinkedIn, I'm probably going to pair it with a piece of content. So let's say like 5 steps you need to do in case of RevOps turnovers. Like, here's a guide for you to digest, and I'm going to put that there. Now, for a lot of people, it's not going to be relevant, but for the people that read it, they're going to be like, oh my God, this is exactly what we need. And then that's how we're going to start the conversation. So same idea, like, you can use data in both your CRM system, your marketing automation system, you can use it in advertising platforms, but you're going to try to like get your audience and your message and your content to all be like one thing. And that'll make the pipeline generation activity like far more efficient, if that makes sense.
So on LinkedIn, are you using, this is a social post? Or are you using like InMail Are you just connecting with these people, finding them, connecting with them, like sending them a connection request and then messaging this to them?
LinkedIn, we're going to do, so like if let's say we were to run with this example for a second, like we would do, we do something like a architecture in advertising on LinkedIn called sequential retargeting. We call it that, which is basically like a large bucket of people who don't know us, followed by a smaller bucket of people who do know us, followed by a smallest bucket of people who have really engaged with us. So we're going to run ads to those people. So maybe the top section would be like an ad for this podcast. Like you want to learn some stuff about marketing. Alexander and Andrew have a good podcast. Like, come join us. Then the second bucket down is like, oh, you clicked on the ad for the podcast. Maybe you'll be interested in the RevOps guide that Andrew mentioned on the podcast. And so then we'll run ads. Oh, you downloaded that. Like you clicked on that ad and then you filled out the form. Like, okay, cool. Now we're going to send you an ad for DRA, Digital Reach's roadmap, which is kind of our foot in the door offer. It's like a go-to-market plan, basically. And so but we're not going to advertise the roadmap to someone who's never heard of us. We're going to advertise it only to the people who are actually like in that zone. So that's like the LinkedIn advertising infrastructure. And then I would pair that with really just great, interesting content on a relevant subject in organic social itself. So I might go on and post about some stuff that I learned from dealing with like collapsing RevOps departments. I might tag some people that have interesting perspectives on it. I might go find some other conversations that are happening in that area and sort of tag them as well. And then if we have like a really, really prescribed list, I would probably not do this so much for like lead generation. You can still do it, but it's less effective than it is like, or less appropriate than it is for ABM. But like a list of people you might send a connection request to and like an in-mail to kind of thing. It's similar to email in a sense. Like you want to make sure that the content you're bringing is super relevant. I guess the last thing I'll say is there's always a relationship between how engaged your audience is and how good your content is. If your content is hyper engaged, I can post what I had for lunch today and people will be like, cool, that's interesting content. If people don't know me at all, it's spam. And so finding like, if you're going to send email, for example, on LinkedIn, like make sure it's like something really worth engaging on, like a really powerful message, a really good piece of content, like something that people won't be, even if they don't read it, they'll be like, okay, like at least I get why they're sending me this. Like this is something that that could be valuable.
Man, that's great. And I love that it's not just like, hey, we're going to hijack the sales team. We're going to have them reach out to these 500 people until we get some responses. You're really kind of building a relationship there.
People can try, but nothing is better than building actual trust.
Right.
Like real relationships.
So you've mentioned trust kind of throughout this conversation. Do you have a certain way that you approach or that you think about building trust?
I mean, I think this question hits a little different just because I'm a business owner and like we, my name is attached to our product or my name is attached to like what we do as a company. And so for me, trust is kind of the ultimate currency. Like if my company promises we're going to do something, like that is me promising that. And so our trust, we need to like really trust each other to engage in that. I think that in the upper funnel, the best way to prove trust when you don't really know someone yet is giving away really valuable info so that somebody is like, oh, okay, this person is not just giving me nonsense. Like they're giving me something that they clearly like worked at or like developed expertise at, that they're giving me something that's useful. And then, and this is going to come all the way down the funnel, but like, who can vouch that you are good? So the network of people that think your product is great is by far your most valuable asset as a company. And so if I post something really valuable on LinkedIn, and then a friend of mine who is the director of marketing at a well-known company chimes in to talk about the thing, like that is immediate social proof that this is like, oh, you can trust what Andrew's saying. Like Andrew is like reputable in this space, and then we can interact in that way. as you get further down the funnel, how exceptional is your experience, or is the experience of becoming a customer? Does the salesperson really seem to care about your needs, or are they just pushing for a close? Once you buy the software, buy the service, or whatever it is it delivering beyond your expectations, or is it overhyped and not accurately described? Once you have gotten someone all the way through to the point where they've had an exceptional experience, they become your most valuable asset, and they'll show it on G2 with the reviews. They'll show it in testimonials. They'll provide case studies, and most importantly, they'll provide direct referrals. Like they'll say, like, this person should go work with you. And so I think it's a real organizational thing. Like starting at the very beginning of the process, the focus needs to be on like being upstanding, trustworthy, providing really great expertise. And I think the company that I'm always obsessed with in talking about this is Zappos, the shoe sales company. I don't know if you've ever bought a Zappos shoe before.
I have not. I
Zappos became
generally
famous.
Avoid buying clothing as much as I can.
Yeah, well, so Zappos became famous somehow as a online shoe company because their commitment to creating an exceptional experience is completely above and beyond anything that anyone have ever experienced. Like I once lost one shoe. It's a long story of how I lost one shoe. And they had a text line. So I texted them, and somebody texted me back immediately and was like, "Hey, what happened?" I told him the story, and he's just like, "Oh man, let me go see if I can get you one shoe." And came back and was like, "Okay, so good news and bad news. Like, couldn't get you one shoe, but I can just send you a new pair of shoes." And I'm like, "Well, hey man, like it was my fault that I lost the shoe." And he's like, "Don't sweat it. Just, enjoy shopping at Zappos." Wow. And this was completely mind-blowing. And I have told the story on air. I've told the story to like many people. And I'm sure that my net value to the brand Zappos is way higher than the cost of that one pair of shoes. But they just truly cared about an exceptional experience. So going all the way back to your idea of building trust, like they built so much trust with me, both from their brand reputation and then the actual experience, like holding true, that it's like, okay, if I ever want to buy a pair of shoes, that's the first place I look. Like that's by far the best experience. So yeah, I think trust is throughout the whole thing, but don't forget about the very bottom of the funnel, which is like your actual customers. Those are the most valuable ones.
Well, and that's such a good story, partly because like if a shoe company can do it, which I think anybody could assume, hey, this is boring. We're just going to sell shoes and call it good. But if a shoe company can create an experience like that, any company can create a better experience. There's a really good podcast with the guy who founded Liquid Death, the water company. I can send it to you later. It's but he has this really great quote where he says, "Your brand can't be your function." So like Zappos' function is that they sell shoes. Their brand is that they provide insane customer service, like an unbelievable amount of customer service. Nike sells shoes. Nike's brand is that athletics are something special. Yeah. And they're like, I think a lot of people fall into this trap in trying to go to market of being like, I'm going to sell based off of my function. And your function is commoditized. Like you have competitors, they're all doing something kind of similar. Your brand is something different. Your brand is about building trust. Absolutely. I think even in this conversation, I'm hearing like, well, we do a lot of the same things as you. And I think that's kind of, as a marketing agency, it's like, man, everybody offers basically the same services. So how is a person going to choose one versus another? One option is price. Well, if you don't want to race to the bottom, then you're going to have to choose something else to compete on and to get picked over. If somebody's talking to 4 marketing agencies, it's not that they're going to choose us every time, but we want the folks who might connect with us better. Yep. We don't serve the startups, the funded startups and stuff like you. So there's a difference as well as kind of in the customer base. But if all things are kind of equal, price is equal, or even if you're a little bit more expensive, it's like, man, you can still create something that somebody would choose you, even if you're more expensive. And this is
sometimes because you're more expensive. Like there's a great story of I forget which brand, it's a car brand, tried to make a copy of a Lexus, but made it cheap. It was exactly a Lexus, but cheap. No one bought it. It's like no one associated this brand with luxury. And if you wanted luxury, you went and spent the money for it.
Right.
And so even though it was cheaper, it's like, that's not the brand.
Or quality. I think there's also this
Yeah.
this aspect of I do pay more money for cars that I believe are not going to break.
Yeah, totally.
And there's multiple paths to get there, but part of it's brand.
That's brand. No, it really is brand. And brand not just in the story they're telling, but in the fact that they follow through.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone knows that Hondas and Toyotas last forever.
Right.
It's part of the brand, and it's also a thing that is real. So, yeah, no, I hear you.
Okay, so I mean, you've shared even parts of this strategy here for bringing in leads, which I like that you kind of summarized the pieces, right? Because everybody talks about SEO, everybody talks about Google Ads and stuff, and it's the way that you talked about it, though, kind of it was through a different lens, and even the mix of these different strategies. It's just simple. It sounds so simple when you're talking about it like this. Is there anything missing in this pipeline conversation that we're having here?
Oh, I mean, there's like tons and tons and tons and tons of things, but I think, I think it's enough for folks to realize that it's an interconnected or integrated system. So it's not just you put all your money on Google and then you make money. It is all a balancing act between how much money you put into your ads, how much money you put into your content, how much money you put into your brand, whether or not you accelerate by spending on paid money, or whether you like build long-term equity by building an organic presence. Like it is all this balancing act. And that's the kind of act that like we basically advise companies in how to proceed with that.
Love it. So let's say somebody's hearing this and they're like, man, the digital reach sounds like it's for me. How do they find you? How do they get in touch, work with you?
Yeah, come to digitalreachagency.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn and shoot me a note. Always happy to receive conversations that way. But yeah, you find us on there, and then our kind of introductory program we call Roadmap. And the idea of that is we do an immersion into these 4 areas: the brand and content, digital experience, RevOps, and pipeline. And then after the immersion, we do essentially a full evaluation. We'll give you a letter grade of kind of where you are on different things. And then lastly, we give you a execution ready go-to-market plan from your current state to your future state. So we tell you how long we think it'll take, we tell you how much we think it'll cost, tell you what things you should really worry about, what things you shouldn't worry about. And then from there, we go from there. People could take those roadmaps and bring them in-house, or people could bring us in to do the build, or people could bring us in to scale and test their systems into the future. So yeah, that's how we roll.
Awesome. Okay, so digitalreachagency.com. You start off with a roadmap so folks know where they are, where they're going. Love that.
Exactly.
Okay, well, thanks, Andrew. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, appreciate it, Alexander. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Clear Brand Marketing Podcast. If you need help with your website or marketing, go to clearbrand.com. You can schedule a free strategy call with one of our consultants, or take advantage of our free resources to help you write, design, or implement a better website and marketing.